J'admire beaucoup votre travail, mais j'y connais pas du tout.
Mais comme il ne remplit trop, il a pas du coup ses séries.
D'accord.
Il ne gère plus comme celui-là, voilà, il a dû avoir.
Ça, c'est le.
Ça, c'est la langue, il avait eu. Il a dû se coincer quelque part. Il a dû se coincer quelque part.
So we had to develop a special type of person, a hard, tough, disconnected male, capable of sustained violence, who would stab the animals, castrate them, confine them, rape them, steal their babies. So it made us harden ourselves. And that the workers in animal agriculture have the highest rates of work-related injuries, the highest rates of suicide, drug addiction, alcoholism, and spousal abuse and child abuse. They go back into their neighborhoods and into their families and do terrible things because at work they're just stabbing animals all day or electroshocking them or hitting them. And so we force them to essentially repress their natural compassion, because I want to go to the store and take out my wallet and pay for something. I'm directly paying not only for the suffering of these animals, but really for the violence and abuse of people who then do, unfortunately, create webs of trauma throughout our entire society.
Animals are their own beings, and children are innately interested in animals and other life forms, but we are taught to desensitize and disassociate from our own human animal instincts that would have us see the effects of our behavior, looking into another living being's eyes and seeing the effects of our choices.
That's what it is. You didn't like that?
But whenever you hold them, it feels really weird. They don't feel fine.
Our food system is a result of intentional, organized, calculated collusion between the government and industry, whether it's the food industry or animal agriculture or pharmaceutical or healthcare. So introducing children to veganism introduces a critical thinking practice that allows a child to move through life in a completely different way. I was teaching at an elementary school, and the kids were all curious why I wasn't eating the string cheese and the milk that they were being served at recess. And I went to find a book that we could talk about together that would explain my choices. And what I found were books about talking animals or talking vegetables. And I felt that took away from A, the emotional lives of animals, and B, the capabilities of children to understand the problems that we face in the world and to be part of the solution. I created the book that I wanted and started shopping that around and got rejection after rejection that this topic was inappropriate, it was too scary, it was too intense for children. I found a very progressive publisher that was interested, and we still had to convince them that this movement was growing and that there would be a market who needed this book because there wasn't anything else like it. There was no nonfiction vegan books for kids. So we went ahead and did it. I think engaging children in the vegan discussion is basically more a practice for adults than it is for the kids. We have an imagined frailty that we assign to children that isn't actually there. It's a certain concept of childhood that has been handed down over the years, but there is no universal concept of childhood. So addressing tough topics is not hard if you just speak frankly to children. You don't need to make it emotional or scary. You just give them the facts. You give them the facts about animals and about our health and about the environment and how much power we have as individuals to make change in society. I think while a vegan child may be alone in their classroom, I don't see it as being alienated. The vegan kids that I know and the stepdaughter that I've helped raise are very strong in their vegan convictions. And that, I think, comes down to a fundamental understanding that their parents have given them by including them in the conversations, by including them in what the parents are learning about animals, about health, about agriculture, about animal cognition and ethology, the behavior of animals. So when a child understands the motives completely and deeply, they can't be shaken from their convictions. This is Vegan is Love, Having Heart and Taking Action. And the introduction is one of my favorite parts of all of the books. How wonderful that at this very moment, every person, big and small, has the power to create a better world. We don't have to wait to grow older for laws to change or for presidents to be elected. We can begin right now. We can choose to live without using animals for food, clothing, or for fun. As vegans, we live this way because it is best for our health, for animals, and for the earth. And that is love. Many people know that animals around the world are treated badly, yet they turn their minds away. To be vegan means to care deeply about how our choices help or harm animals, how we create peace or suffering in the world. Our choices are powerful. Vegan is love.
His theory is that we have completely changed our systems. We have trained our bodies from birth to eat animal products and to upregulate those enzymes and to be able to metabolize animal products because we've grown up on that, which has changed our chemistry. And then when we stop, if we stop suddenly or if we stop, if we just stop eating that stuff and our body's expecting it, we're changing the chemistry and it doesn't know how to adapt. So it has to do with adaptation, which is very fascinating. So his advice is to start very slowly to change to a plant-based diet.
The common theme in the stories that I hear are people that are overweight, never thought of themselves as athletes, and are heavily medicated. They're on statin drugs or they're on antidepressants. They're on a whole battery of medications. And the emails that I get are, my doctor told me I would have to take these medications for the rest of my life. I never once thought that I would ever entertain the idea of eating a plant-based diet, so far outside of my frame of reference. I didn't consider myself an athlete. I've never been a runner. I've always been 80 pounds overweight. I've gone on diets and yo-yoed, all these sorts of things. And then the common sort of, after is, here I am, I just ran my first marathon. You would never have believed my doctor's reaction when I went into his office and told him after he took my blood tests and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm not taking the statins anymore. Like all of these amazing stories of personal transformation and really people who are taking control of their lives rather than abdicating control to this person or this doctor or whatever their friend said, but really like for the first time looking at themselves and saying, this is what I want, and actually implementing changes that have created new sustainable paths for them. And it's incredibly gratifying.
Okay, here's a perfect example. I have a client. He came to me with massive issues, like health issues. And he's young and healthy, but he had all these like major chronic issues, eczema, asthma, allergies, stuff like that. Put him on a plant-based diet, in 3 days, all better, right? Fitness improved, everything's better. But then he read an article, he's like, wait, I was told that I need to have meat because of blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, go try it. You feel so good, your energy's better, you've solved your chronic conditions. You really don't believe it? Like you've seen it yourself. So I would say try it, read the literature, know that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, everyone supports it. Now the USDA is probably going to have to support a plant-based diet. The research speaks for itself. There is no question that you are not only safe, but you are healthier off by eating a plant-based diet.
Here's the point. So, of course, evolution is not about living until you are 85 or 90 and retired in the Bahamas. Evolution is about passing on your genes. And so it only favored our ancestors to live long enough so they could pass their genes. And they often died at 35. That was, that was the average age of people when the people died back then. So, of course, nowadays we want to live longer than 35, and we care a little bit about different things. We want to have long, happy lives. And here is the problem, because meat causes a lot of health issues in the older age. So once you hit 40, 50, 60, and so on, meat has been connected to cancer, to heart disease, to diabetes, and so on. So these are usually the diseases that our ancestors, these were not at the top of their problems. Their problems were, have enough to eat, run away from the lion. These were the problems they had, not avoiding cancer and living to be 95. So the priorities have changed. So something that used to be good for our ancestors and nourish them is no longer good for us. In the same way, for example, if you are in a desert and you have no water, and you find a stream or some kind of source of water that's very dirty and probably brimming with bacteria and so on, it is still a really good idea to drink from the source, because otherwise you die. But if you are, in I don't know, Manhattan, and you have bottled Evian with you, it will be really stupid to drink dirty water brimming with bacteria, right? So it's just a question of what's available and what's best at the time.
Why are we torturing all these animals? All we're doing is harming ourselves and the planet in so doing, and we're creating this gigantic karmic debt in the process. And it's really deplorable, and the system is set up to prevent the average consumer from really understanding what's going on. I mean, for years I thought, what's wrong with wool? All wool, they're just giving a haircut to these animals. And when you see what they're actually doing to these animals to create that wool sweater, it's absolutely horrifying. And I think as human beings, we're all inherently compassionate people. And we don't want to look at that stuff, because we know if we do, then we might have to modify our behavior. And we don't like to modify our behavior. We like to do what we're doing. And these companies want us to continue to do what we're doing. But I think it's incumbent upon us to all be much more educated and astutely aware about how products, whether it's a food product or a clothing product, arrives in the store and on your back or on your plate. And in this age of the internet, we have so many resources available to us. What a gift, what a wonderful, amazing thing to be able to hit a few keystrokes and find out the truth about anything. We're the first generation in the history of mankind that has that kind of power. And I think with that comes a certain responsibility and a level of advocacy that we really need to grab onto, take hold of, and use to better this planet and better humankind.
Livestock to greenhouse gas emissions, which is about 51%. That's a high number. It's a higher number than it's often in the media. But what the scientists did who came up with that figure, they said, listen, all livestock breathes. And by virtue of taking a breath and expelling a breath, they're emitting carbon. And there's an unnatural number of animals in the world today. There's 66 billion animals a year that are slaughtered, right? At the same time you have this buildup of animals on their surface, you have a decline in the forest. And so the whole source to sink relationship has been disrupted. And so you have to count that emissions of carbon that's breathing. So once you do that, you get this 51% figure. If you can reduce by 25% animal protein consumption globally by 2020, you can meet the international protocols and targets that have been set for greenhouse gas emission reduction just by that single action.
People want to know, where do you get your protein? There's this idea that because I'm pushing my body so hard and I'm not eating animal products, that my diet is automatically deficient in protein, and that somehow I must be suffering or doing something secretly or cheating on my diet and not telling anybody. And I think that we need to take a step back and really look at this protein question, this protein issue. I call it the protein myth.
So people attribute meat as protein, but protein is one of 3 macronutrients which constitutes all of our food. There's carbohydrates, fats, and protein. All intact foods have some combination of all 3, and it's very misleading to call protein a food.
I think in general that health and animal agriculture and our food production is something that's put on layaway. That we don't address these topics in childhood because people think that it's not appropriate. But at this point in the 11th hour, with the environmental and health crises that we face, it's important to educate the next generation because we no longer have time to waste. The new generation has to learn a new way of thinking and eating and living if we're going to green our society.
Before I went plant-based, I was your typical junk food junkie. Throughout most of my 20s and 30s, I really overlooked health and fitness. I was very focused on my profession, building a family, doing all of these things that we sort of aspire to. And as a result, by the time I was 39 years old, I was 50 pounds overweight. But more importantly than that, I was just lethargic. I was unenthusiastic about my life. And that intersected with a health crisis. Sort of treating myself poorly for so long really caught up to me shortly before I turned 40.
I think it's the hardest thing to do is to transition to a healthy diet when we've grown up in the standard American diet with fast food prevalence and everything. I think that the best thing to do is obviously education, but not everyone has access to that. Ideally, you have access to internet and you can start researching and reading books. There's some great books we need to get into the library so people know, like, oh wait, I could just put rice and lentils together and have a full meal. That's easy and cheap and effective.
And it was a very specific moment in time when I knew that not only that I needed to change my lifestyle habits, my diet, and how I was sort of taking care of myself, but also that I wanted to change. And my whole life, my mother would say to me, you got to watch out for your heart. Heart disease runs in our family. And her father had been a champion swimmer in his own right. He was captain of the University of Michigan swim team back in the 1920s. He was an Olympic hopeful. He was an American record holder. He was an amazing guy. Never smoked, was never overweight, continued to stay fit and swam in Lake Michigan his whole life, and still, nonetheless, died of a heart attack at age 54 when my mother was still in college. And certainly long before I was ever born. And I share his name. His name was Richard Spindle. I was named after him. And so there's this weird kind of thing where, I thought of him and I knew that, if I didn't change the way that I was living, that I was headed in his direction, and probably quite a bit sooner, because he was not eating at Jack in the Box and McDonald's every day like I was.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the other kind of caveat or corollary to that is that I was able to recognize the power of that moment when on the staircase. Like, I knew I have a window of opportunity here to change my life. And I was able to recognize how powerful those and how fleeting those moments are, because many years prior, when I was 31 years old, I had a similar moment. I'm in recovery for drug and alcohol addiction. And throughout my 20s, I was a mess and went to some very dark places as a result of being an alcoholic. And I had that moment that you hear about with people in recovery, where they have their moment of clarity when they've hit their bottom and they decide, today's the day I'm going to do something about that. And I had that moment, and that moment changed my life. And so I realized and was able to recognize that seizing one of these moments when it arises really can change your life. And so when that happened on the staircase, I thought, oh, this is familiar. This is what it felt like that other time that this happened. I have another opportunity to now change my life again. And the fact that I was able to recognize that and seize it and take action upon that really is why we're sitting here talking today.
The subtext of every meal is don't make the connection. It'd be very strange for someone at breakfast while everybody's eating bacon to say, I wonder what she was like. Or do you wonder what who was like? The animal, the pig we were eating. that's not a pig, that's just bacon. You know, we're taught it so deep to just never think about that, just don't go there. And so what the subtext of every meal is to stay shallow, don't think deeply, believe whatever anybody tells you. And so what veganism is essentially is looking deeply. It's being willing to look beyond the surface level of things and look deeply. And that can be threatening to other people who have been taught not to do that, but ultimately it's enormously liberating, not only for vegans, but really for everyone. It gives permission to everyone to come out of this line where we're just going along with the blinders on, following nose to tail, right to devastation, really.
I think we're a meat and dairy addicted society and culture. I think that, you know, if you look back through the generations, certainly, you know, meat was part of the diet, but it never proliferated on our plates to the extent that it does now. It was a delicacy, it was a side dish, it was something to, you know, that was considered special.
The other thing is that there's just an enormous amount of advertising and other ways of trying to cajole people into eating these products because the profit margin is so high on them. And the other thing is that it really works very well for what I refer to as the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media complex. You know, there's this vast complex in place that supports, again, a wealthy elite that's been in many ways in power for a long time. And they're not making money in many ways like on us as vegans. My wife and I haven't been to a doctor in nearly 40 years. You know, we don't need to buy any medical products. We don't really believe the official stories of our society. And so I think we're less easily controlled when we begin to question the food. We're healthier. Perhaps of physical addiction and eating animal foods. I think that's been pretty well demonstrated. There's casomorphines and so forth that are released that can be perhaps physically addictive, but I think primarily it's a matter of emotional and psychological view and a certain type of addiction. For example, as a little child, maybe I come home, I'm maybe 6 or 7 years old, and my mother's making supper, and I smell the pot roast, and I know that's you know, my mother loves me because she's making pot roast. You know, that's what I like to eat. I know that was true for me when I was a kid, and you know, and if I come home later, you know, maybe and now there's tofu cooking or something, and I think, well, that's not what I got when I was a little kid. You know, we have these very deep memories that perhaps we're still attached to. We want to get along in social situations. We are very much looking to outer cues very often for acceptance and approval. Very often we have a self-image of someone who is a meat eater or loves cheese or ice cream. And so all these things can make it difficult, especially in the beginning, to make a transition to veganism.
We're seeing the results of that. That overconsumption is a huge contributing factor to the level of chronic disease that we're experiencing right now. When you look at healthcare in America right now, it's an unmitigated disaster. We are in the midst of an unspeakable healthcare crisis. You look at heart disease, America's #1 killer. 1 out of every 2 Americans will suffer some form of heart disease incident in their life. 1 out of every 3 deaths in America is attributable to heart disease. Obesity, 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese. Studies indicate that by 2030, 50% of Americans will be diabetic or pre-diabetic. These results, these statistics are just absolutely insane. 75% of all healthcare costs are attributable to heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and 2 forms of cancer, breast and prostate. And the great irony is that 80 to 90% of all of these chronic conditions are easily eradicated, prevented, or reversed through simple diet and lifestyle alterations. And that's where plant-based nutrition can come in as a complete win.
The research shows that vegans compared to vegetarians, compared to pescatarians, compared to meat eaters, and semi-vegetarians, the more meat you consume, the higher your mortality, the higher risk for cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and certain cancers. So the more plant-based you are, the less risk you have, the healthier off you are. vegan diet is the only diet that's ever been shown to reverse disease, namely type 2 diabetes with Dr. Neil Barnard's study, and cardiovascular disease or coronary artery disease with Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn and Dr. Dean Ornish's work. So we've shown that we could literally reverse chronic disease. The fast food industry is very good at marketing. They spend a lot of money on marketing. It's very effective. They hit kids, they hit teachers, they hit schools, hospitals. There's fast food restaurants in hospitals all over the country, which needs to stop. That's so wrong. And it's so backwards because you can get a full meal for $1, whereas, if you have to go out and you have to find healthy food, it costs more money, or can cost more money. Like, even if you look at the USDA My Plate, this kills me. It's vegetables, fruits, whole grains, protein. And it's like, one of these things is not like the other. It's so stupid because protein is not a food.
So it's going to take time to break down in people's minds that our food system has not been a benevolent project. It's been based on efficiency for profit.
Aspects of the northern civilization, like mining, like agriculture, like medicine, all represented by naked and holding tools, typical of...
I had treated myself so horribly for so long, so many years, with drugs and alcohol and terrible lifestyle habits and fast food and all these sorts of things. And in a mere 7 days, by doing one simple thing, I felt completely different. I showed up back at the race in 2009, and after the swim, I got out of the ocean with a 10-minute lead on the next athlete, and held that lead all day on the bike, and finished the first stage, the first day of that race, with a 10-minute lead on the whole field. And then that's when I thought, I think this plant-based diet is working out. There's something about it that I think is agreeing with me, because at the time I was 43 years old. I was supposed to be a corporate lawyer. I'd only started riding a bike 2 years prior. Like, I had no business even being there. And yet I was in the lead at the Ultraman World Championships. Like, it was crazy.
I've always been really intuitive as a child, and I always had a really special connection with animals. I kind of always felt that I was connecting to them intuitively. When I was a child, if I had a headache, I would tell my mom, put your hand on my head so that you could feel the pain, because I could do that with other people. So I just assumed everybody could do it. It wasn't until I became an adult that I realized that that's not common. All right, well, I started boxing when I was 12. I started competing at 16. I won the Golden Gloves 4 times. I won the Nationals twice. I went to the Olympic trials, and it wound up not passing, unfortunately, as a sport. After we had already qualified for the Olympics, they sent us all registered letters and told us that it wasn't going to pass as a sport because India wouldn't sign. But that was my goal, was to go to the Olympics. And then I started wrestling. I wrestled in college. I've competed in boxing. I've competed in Muay Thai. I'm nationally ranked as a bikini competitor in bodybuilding, fitness division as a fitness model. And I also compete in powerlifting and squat, deadlift, and bench. My main protein source is seitan, which I make myself at home. It's made of vital wheat gluten, which is the protein. It's derived from wheat. And so it's a lot like bread, making it. It just has 4 ingredients. It's wheat, whole wheat flour, water, and seasoning. And I bake it myself. And it's per serving. It has actually more protein and less calories and less carbs than boiled chicken breast, which is like the staple in every bodybuilder's diet. So I eat that a lot. And then I also drink protein shakes 2 a day. Even when I'm not competing, though, I'm really conscious about my protein intake. I'm almost like obsessed with making sure that I'm at least getting like 100 grams of protein a day. So I eat a lot of like high protein vegan food, such as the Gardein products. They're almost the same as regular meat. In my diet off season, I love Soy Dreamery. I eat that like, I probably have 8 pounds of body fat from Soy Dreamery. It's so good. What else do I really love? I'm not usually a big junk food vegan, but I do eat Oreos and soy ice cream. And also, I really like Gardein products, like everything Gardein. My freezer, the Gardein meatballs, I actually went to every Target within about a 15-mile radius, and I bought all the meatballs. My freezer was just stocked full of meatballs, so delicious. Even when I'm not competing though, I'm really conscious about my protein intake. I'm almost like obsessed with making sure that I'm at least getting like 100 grams of protein a day. So I eat a lot of like high protein vegan food, such as the Gardein products. They're almost the same as regular meat. That's my favorite. And then I have to give a shout out to Chicago Diner in Chicago. It is by far the best restaurant on the planet. So good. I want to fly back there just to have lunch. All right, well, I started boxing when I was 12. I started competing at 16. I won the Golden Gloves 4 times. I won the Nationals twice. I qualified, I went to the Olympic trials and it wound up not passing, unfortunately, as a sport. After we had already qualified for the Olympics, they sent us all registered letters and told us that it wasn't going to pass as a sport because India wouldn't sign. But that was my goal, was to go to the Olympics. And then I started wrestling. I wrestled in college for 2 years. I competed in judo for 2 years. And then I started competing in bodybuilding. I won the Natural North America, the OCB Midwest States, the Windy City Classic. And then I competed in powerlifting. And I won the last competition I did was called the Muscle Beach Liftoff. And I had 2 pro Muay Thai fights.
So nature has it hardwired that it's almost impossible to be deficient in this macronutrient. It is almost impossible, and yet everywhere you go to the grocery store, and you're being pushed this message of protein, 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 more protein, more protein, more is better.
In my 20+ years in the health and fitness industry, I have never seen a protein deficiency. I see cardiovascular disease, I see cancer, I see type 2 diabetes, I see obesity every single day. And those are brought on by eating these processed foods, these animal products, and the standard American diet.
Hairy people are walking around eating 2 to 3 times the amount of protein that they require. If all you did was eat bananas, you would meet your RDA of 10% of calories from protein every day.
You know, if you think about protein, getting protein, and you compare the same amount of calories of protein coming from meat versus the same amount of calories coming from protein from a plant source, in the meat, you're getting stuff you don't want in your body. High levels of saturated fat, heme iron, insulin-like growth factor 1, steroids, hormones, antibiotics, right? You also get 0 fiber and 0 phytochemicals, which are 2 most important food groups possible. Like, you need phytochemicals and fiber to fight off chronic disease. That's key. So you're getting both stuff you don't want that are health damaging, plus you're not getting the stuff that you do want, which are health supporting.
And I had that moment that you hear about with people in recovery where they have their moment of clarity when they've hit their bottom and they decide, you know, today's the day I'm going to do something about that. And I had that moment, and that moment changed my life. And so I realized and was able to recognize that seizing one of these moments when it arises really can change your life. And so when that happened on the staircase, I thought, oh, this is familiar. This is what it felt like that other time that this happened. I have another opportunity to now change my life again. And you know, the fact that I was able to recognize that and seize it and take action upon that really is, you know, why we're sitting here talking today.
I think the problem with sustainable education is that anything can be made to sound like it's sustainable. There's a whole industry now that's built around humane or humane meat, or grass-fed organic meat. It's the same system we have, dressed in a different outfit. So I think the problem there with doing anything on a curriculum-based level is that it's subject to compromise. It's subject to industry. It's subject to the contracts that the school has with who provides the food for the school. So I'm more interested in individuals and groups outside of any kind of codified program making change, because that's all that has ever changed society is individual thought and those people coming together outside of the status quo.
Albert Einstein famously said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think that's very apropos to our relationship to food and the environment.
I think what we have now with our food system is, and it reaches all of those other industries, it's a hard pill to swallow for people. And it's going to take time to overhaul all of the economic, psychological, traditional, and cultural values that are built around that old model.
If we think that we're going to feed the planet the way that we always have been, by grazing animals in the way that we currently do, we're insane. We can't feed the planet that way. There simply isn't enough land, there isn't enough resources. We're polluting the oceans too quickly. We are decimating the rainforest. We are creating species extinction on a mass scale. This is an unsustainable, broken system that needs to get fixed. We need a new way. The only way that we can address this insanity is to step away from it and look at it from a new perspective.
I think today we have to approach veganism and getting the word out by describing how veganism is a moral and ethical, time-sensitive solution to the problems that we're facing, the crises that we're facing with our health, with our economy, with the environment, with the healthcare system. It's just time.
And that's what's so exciting about what's going on right now with companies like Beyond Meat and Hampton Creek, et cetera, is that they're trying to solve this problem not through the lens of the current system parameters of grazing animals for food, but looking at it from a completely new perspective. And that's the way we're going to solve this problem. That is the way we're going to address global climate change. That is the way that we are going to have a more ethical approach to the animals with whom we share this planet. And that is how we are going to move forward and feed the planet in a more humane, ethical, economically and environmentally conscious way.